Tony D and Little Joan in the background, and this is a screenwriter's rant on. Well, let me read you the comment. I had a comment from Shadow of the Raven, and I think this is going to be a good topic to talk about on the live stream on Sunday. On a different subject, as a writer, says Raven, or Shadow of the Raven, I was wondering what you think about movie franchise tropes. By this I mean, for example, the second movie in a franchise, they take things that they think the audience liked from the first movie and do them again, usually bigger and better, and so on throughout the franchise. I personally hate that. Well, I can kind of understand what you're saying. And as I already shot one take of this video, and I kind of went on a big tangent, and it's definitely material for the live stream, but I'll try to keep it nice and tight here. You can go on Wikipedia, and we'll go over these on Sunday. You can see all the crazy sequels they've had. Some work, some don't. Some grossed a ton of money. Not a lot of comedies, but I did eventually find one, Airplane 2, the sequel, which I do remember being good. The first thing you have to remember is, like, there is some good in repeating what was done before, because that's what made the movie a hit. The question is, how much of what was done before should you repeat? It's a tough call. So if you look at Rocky, Rocky 2 was essentially Rocky 1, except Rocky wins. Whereas if you look at the sequel, let's say, of Iron Man, right? The first movie's the origin. The second movie is sort of Iron Man being Iron Man. And that happens in a lot of superhero movies. Usually the first movie's the origin, and then the second movie is like, oh, he's already established, but now here's a bigger villain. What I like to see in a sequel is something as different as possible without going completely off the rails from why the franchise was good to begin with, right? So to me, a great sequel is The Godfather. That to me is probably the best sequel of all time. Godfather 2, I feel in many ways is superior to the first movie. It ups the ante. It's got a kind of a different feel to it than the first one, and the weight of the first one, you can feel it in the second one, and there's all these great flashbacks that really tie in well together. I just think it's a phenomenal movie. The Empire Strikes Back, I think, is in that category too, because, and maybe that's just the movies from my time, but the great thing about The Empire Strikes Back is the good guys, spoilers, lose. And it's really Act 2 of a 3-act structure with the trilogy, where you get all the payoffs in 3, and yet 2 is a phenomenal movie. Star Wars 2 is a lot of fun, still interesting, darker, but then it gets lighter in the third movie. So it's a lot of fun. It's a classic movie, I think. I think where what you're talking about more specifically is now Hollywood has franchise-itis, right? They're franchising everything. They're doing sequels to everything they could possibly. Oh, we're doing a universe. There's a new universe, which back in the day we wanted. We wanted for the movies we liked. Movie like Buckaroo Banzai, which didn't do well commercially, and that had a lot of potential. Unfortunately, it commercially it didn't do well, and they just moved on to the next thing. The ones I really hate, what you're talking about, some of it's fan service. It's when it's too much fan service or not enough. I think that's when people don't like the movie. It has to be a balance in there. But even when you talk about Rocky 2 is fan service. It's basically taking Rocky 1 and saying, oh no, now Rocky's going to win. That's basically all it is. And it's not until the third movie that you start adding new elements. You know, you start really adding new elements and moving the side characters forward, um, and it's a great franchise. Don't get me wrong. It's just the second one. Yeah, it's it's good. It's good. It helps also too the history of it. The great thing about the Rocky franchise is it has a great history and the continuity has stayed the same. But when you look at sort of like one of the ones that's on the list here is Mad Max Fury Road. That's on a lot of lists. Is it even a sequel? I don't know. Is it a reimagining or is it a sequel? Is this Max after Thunder Road? I guess. Um, it's hard to tell. I don't know if they specifically say that or it's just further adventures. I guess it technically is a sequel. Feels like more like a reboot. I hate reboots. Absolutely loathe reboots. They tend to be awful. Um, Prequels have zero use for prequels. Zero use. Name a prequel that's worth a damn. In my view, I guess the biggest ones are the Star Wars one. I think they're all trash. No, thank you. Um, you know, even the ones, and I love Terminator. The Terminator prequel with Christian Bale. It's not good. It's not a good movie. It's pointless. Don't know why they made it. um, the bottom line is, you can make a terrible movie and make a lot of money, right? So one of the ones on here is Blade Runner 2049. I think it's one of the worst. It's a terrible movie. And it's so far away from the original Blade Runner, like miles away. And, even a movie that would have been okay would have been better than Blade Runner 2049 is not even just okay. It's just god awful from beginning to end. It's pointless. It's boring. There's almost nothing to it. There's almost nothing to that movie. It infuriates me. Um, so, and why? Well, part of it does have fan service. I mean, Decker's in it, but even if they had put Sean Young in it too, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked. First off, they wouldn't have been able to explain Sean Young because she would have had to have been either CGI younger or it would have had to explain why the android aged. They had to explain a lot of things that they didn't bother with. So I think one of the key elements in a franchise that makes it good is the adherence to your own continuity and history. So the Star Trek sequels did that. Even the first Star Trek movie, the motion picture, which is boring, it's not bad. Other than relentless set design redesigns and costume designs, which then happened again, and kept happening. These movie people, oh, we gotta do new sets, new that. Just use the old costumes. They are consistent enough, I think, in the Star Trek movies, and the performances are there, the cast is there. The story, for the most part, is there. Even in the ones that aren't that great, they're there, and it respects what went before, doesn't pretend like it didn't happen. Part of the problem with these sequels in general is just the age, right? Doing a sequel to like a TV show, like even just Stranger Things, it's really tough. You can't do a sequel to The Goonies unless you recast everybody. That's an age thing. I would love to see a sequel to The Lost Boys. Can't do it. Can't do it. Everybody's old now. You'd have to recast the whole run of people, and you wouldn't even be able to bring back. You wouldn't be able to bring back anybody, really. So it's tough, which is probably why they should be rare. Franchises should be rare. They should do them when it really calls for it, when there's a story. Like, if you did The Pineys as a movie, which you totally could, there's plenty of roadway there. I've got tons of books, and you could do sequel after sequel for a long time if you stuck to the books. And for movies, you'd probably want to pick the best of the character development, in the movies, and not do every single book unless you were going to shoot them all together. Because, I got 10 books already. I got the 11th one written. I'm working on the 12th one. That's a lot of movies. So, when you have that much material, as they did in Marvel, what you have to do is plan for either A, the actors leaving, or B, plan to recast them, or B, shoot it up, do what they did with Back to the Future, right? They shot the first one, it was a big hit. They said, oh, let's shoot the sequels together. And that was great. That to me was an example of a great sequel, right? You had the first movie, which is great, and then you have the second movie, which is really sort of like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of the first movie. The character running around trying not to screw things up. And then you got the final movie, which goes completely off the map and ends it. And there should be an ending in mine, too. That's part of the problem, too. There's never an ending in mine. It all goes back to one thing, the writing. The writing's good. Who cares if it's the umpteenth sequel? If it's a solid movie and a solid story that you wanted to see, and writers can make that happen. Unfortunately, not all directors can make it happen. Not all actors can make it happen. They definitely can't do it by themselves. They need writers. It all comes back to the same thing, writing. The writing of the movies, I think. And so, overall, my problem with sequels, and there's just so many of them, now that I'm looking at the entire list and remembering, if you can't do the sequel right, you shouldn't do it. If I was sitting down to write a Pineys book, a sequel, and I got halfway through it and I realized, oh my God, I've written myself into a corner, this is terrible, I would abandon it. And I would either start over or, call it a day. What happens in Hollywood, when they develop something, they could get halfway through the process and realize, wow, this isn't going to be the same. But rather than saying, maybe we shouldn't do this, what they'll usually say is they'll rationalize it. Now, sometimes, and I'm sure there's plenty of instances where they just canceled the movie. They just, maybe the actor didn't like the script or things didn't come together, and they just said, well, we're not going to do this again. So imagine those movies. Imagine how bad some of those movies. And you've heard the alternate, scripts for some of the movies that did get produced. Sometimes they're better. Sometimes they're worse. So overall, it doesn't bother me when they reuse stuff and up the ante. They should be up in the ante, because up in the ante is different than the first movie. It's when they do the same things and the ante doesn't go up. That's the problem. When they do the same things or horribly, it's worse. Again, they should try to repeat the stuff, some of the good stuff from the first movie, but add to it. Because in improv, we're taught yes and you heighten. And if you're not heightening, then what the hell's the point? Why am I watching this if this isn't bigger and better than the original? It has to be bigger and better. It has to be in movies. In TV shows, you've got a little more leeway. You could do something different, easier, and you could do a sequel to an episode in which the characters do something completely different, where you address something the characters normally do and do something completely off the wall with it, because you have a TV show and you're just grinding through episodes. So there's more material there to work with, so you can play around with that dynamic more. In fact, that's a good thing in a TV show, is to have an episode where everybody does completely different things. One of the more interesting ones I saw is when the characters in Archer get stuck in an elevator. That was pretty funny. And that's a different episode. And they didn't have to do that because the characters are in a cartoon show. Usually the elevator episode is a sitcom trope, and they use that in Archer, and it's really sort of a parody of that when you think of it, because they can go anywhere in a cartoon, so why stay in an elevator? But they did it anyway. Anyhow, I don't want to make this too much longer. I think we need to talk about this in the Sunday live stream. It's an interesting topic, so we'll drill down into more of it. What was hot, what was not, why some sequels work, why don't some of them, a lot of them don't, and why Hollywood should abandon some and keep going forward with others. So basically, I guess I just did a big commercial for the live stream. Well, we'll see you Sunday, and we'll see you